Hi there. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and maybe just go over some of my thoughts and give you guys some options related to the pre-supported Hexton Hills tiles. I've printed pretty much the entire set now. Not all from the pre-supported, obviously. I did a couple and then I've kind of rolled my own and moved forward with that. But I just wanted to give you guys maybe some tips and tricks about how you can go about printing more effectively these tiles. Really from a reducing the cost of the tiles, increasing the quality, being able to print more tiles in a single shot, all of the above kind of things. So I just want to start real quick by just taking a look at one of the pre-supported tiles. It doesn't matter which one. I just happened to pick this one. It's relatively simple. It's the plains number one. There's a couple of things that I just wanted to point out about the pre-supporting. First of all, I think, and this is once again, this is just my opinion, and it's take it or with a grain of salt. But when you take a look at this, there's a couple of things that I don't particularly like about the way that it's pre-supported. The first thing, and really the most important, being that the actual supports themselves, as you can see right here, are connected to the faces of the actual model that are intended to be touching each other when you actually connect the pieces together. So no matter what you do here, you're going to end up with some deformities along these edges because you're going to have to clean these up, which means that when you put these tiles together, there's going to be some subtle rocking. It's just not going to be perfect. The fit just won't be as it would be if you didn't have any supports on these edges whatsoever, which is pretty much as smooth as butter when you put them together. Like as an example, on this one here where there are no supports connected to it at all, or even actually all three of these faces, those ones are smooth as butter when you put them into other ones that are of the same type. So it's only when you end up with these supports that are really pinned up against the faces that are going to be connected to the other models. So that's the first slight beef that I have with the pre-supported models. The second beef I have is that these supports are really heavy. Like they're like the weight of this actual tile when it comes out doesn't really necessitate the volume or the magnitude of the supports that are here. There's too many and they're too big. So because of that, it's going to drive up the cost because you're having to use resin to build these supports. Also, because the entire, I'm going to call it plate face of the model is supported, there's no opportunity for you to use any sliding techniques to get another model underneath this so that you can leverage more of your printer's plate to get more instances of models or tiles onto that plate. Because of that, really, you can see here, no matter how I were to angle this specific pre-supported tile, I'd only ever be able to get two of them. Okay. Now, and a last beef, it's not really a beef, it's just more of an observation. And I do wish that when people provided the models that they would do this, especially the pre-supportive ones. The only files that were actually provided, and this isn't just a Hexton Hills thing, this is an everything thing. They give you the STL files, but they don't give you the Cheeto Box files, probably because they're not using Cheeto Box and they don't want to have to tell the different people who are getting them which application they use to build the actual supports. But in this case, if they'd supplied us with the actual Cheeto Box files, we'd be able to go in here and clean this up subtly the way we want to by deleting individual supports. But because it's an STL file, you basically have to start from scratch. But that's not actually me ranting against Hexton Hills or anything like that. That's just in general across the board on all pre-supported files you get from Patreons these days, or whatever, wherever they come from. Okay, so let's take a look now at how I've arranged the tiles that I've printed over time. And like I said, I've pretty much done the entire set. Actually, I'm very confident I've done every tile. But I've probably done several tiles more than once and really tried to optimize the process through which I've gone through it. So that way I can optimize the number of tiles I can print at once, reduce the cost of printing those tiles, and increase the quality of the output of those tiles so that they're significantly better when it comes to the way that they fit together, and less post-processing work for me to do, including cleaning and touch-ups on the tiles and such. So let's go and actually pick the exact same tile that we were just looking at. So I think that was planes 1. Okay, you can see right here, this is just the generic tile, hasn't been touched. You're not going to do anything with this. You'd never print it like this, and even if you wanted to, I could still only fit 2, as you can see. So maybe not even 2 the way this is, I don't know, but you'd never print it this way. Typically what happens here, and I'm very focused on the resin side of the house. The other side of the house, I mean, there's very different techniques for that. But when you start talking about the resin side of the house, you're really trying to protect your resin. You don't want to use more than you need to. Excuse me, and you want to make sure that that the rate of failure from your prints is very, very low. So you want the right amount of supports for the given weight and orientation of the model that you're actually trying to print. These ones are relatively simple, so the solution is relatively simple. In this case, the first thing you're always going to do, and I mean, this isn't rocket science, and this is not me not giving you any words of wisdom here. This is just very generic work. You come in here and you hollow it out. Now, by doing that, obviously, you're going to be leaving, there's a lot of resin here that's not being cured as part of the printing process, so you're going to be able to recoup that. And typically what happens is that to avoid the volume or the vacuum issue that occurs, people put in holes into the bottoms of their, or in non-visible areas of their model, so that they can actually get the resin out either while it prints or after it prints. So if you come in here and let's say we dig a hole, typically you'll see something like this. They'll come in here and they'll put in a hole here, and then they'll put in another hole here, and they'll call it a day. So as this gets drawn up out of the vat, there's a way for air to get in so that the resin will drain out the bottom of whatever it is you're printing. If the holes weren't here, the entire inside of this would, because there's a vacuum created, would have the resin stay within it. So when it got to the end, you'd have created a hole within your model, but it's filled with liquid resin. Okay, so you're not saving yourself anything, but you don't want to go and start drilling it to get the resin out, because then you get particles of slightly cured resin draining with the real resin. It's just a nightmare, so you don't want to do that. So a lot of people end up putting in these little holes, but I don't like this. And the reason I don't like this is what ends up happening is inevitably it's almost impossible to get all of the actual resin out of this reservoir inside the hollowed out area, because you can put this into isopropanol, you can shake it around, you can walk it up and down the street, you could put it in one of those things that you shake paint with, you can do whatever you want. It will not get into these holes enough and guarantee that it's going to pull out all of the resin that's sitting inside of this on the little edges and the little corners in such a way that when you pull this out and you put it underneath your curing machine, or you put it outside in the sun, or you do whatever, that when you bring it in and you think everything is done, that 20 minutes later you'll come down here and this will be wet again. You'll be like, why is this wet? And it's because there's always a little bit of resin left inside this big giant area here, and it will leak. It will leak over time, over days, over weeks, and it's just a mess. It's just not fun to deal with, okay? So my solution to this is actually very similar to what they did in the pre-supported models, okay? So basically, most people would put in these 2 little holes, but for me, I'm very much a go big or go home kind of person. So I'm going to put in a giant hole, okay? And as you can see, this hole is almost the entire base, but it doesn't overlap with any of the holes for the insertions on the edges or anything like that. But it is literally going to create a hole that is the entire bottom. Now, this, you might think that this would cause some type of structural issue, but it actually doesn't, because it's better than the way it normally is, because especially with the pre-supported ones, because the pre-supported ones just have the edge. And then it's open into the bottom. In this case, you've got an entire little ring here that goes around the inside of it that during the curing process will help to resist any warping or buckling that can happen as part of a cure. And even though resin is very, very secure when it cures, it doesn't really shrink and it doesn't really expand. It can do it to a small extent. And by leaving this here, you end up with a structural piece that will hold it all in place and keep it nice and flat. Now you can see I didn't do this very well. Like I didn't put the hole really in the center. So I'm just going to do it again really quickly just to be a little bit more scientific about it. We're going to try and get it a little bit more centered. So let's say right there. Just to give each side, you know, more of a clean edge. So you can see we're now more equidistant across the board around this. Okay. So as you can see now, let's tilt this as if we were going to be printing it, and then I'll explain why this is a significantly better orientation and solution for being able to clean this out than the two single holes. So if we come in here and then I bring this up. Now you noticed I brought it up significantly higher angle than what's in the pre-supported ones, because this is going to allow me to print out a lot more tiles on the actual print plane. Okay. But we'll talk about that in a second. So now take a look at the way that this is oriented here. If this starts to print, where obviously this is the plate, so we're looking at this upside down. Towards the end of the print, you're only going to end up with resin, liquid resin, remaining in this little underbelly area here. So you can see the way that this is at the top. You'll end up with a little bit of liquid resin in there. So when you take your plate off and you're just draining out the resin, you can turn it and a majority of that will just drop immediately straight down into your vat, which means you're not losing it. So that's perfect. And it's had a humongous amount of time to drain off of the existing, the already out of the resin portions of the model. So this isn't dry by any means, but it's got very, very little resin left on it because it's all flowed down to the bottom already. So when you put this in your isopropanol to do a real cleaning, it really has a lot more access to be able to get in here, get at that resin, get it all cleaned out so that there isn't any standing resin in there over time after your cleaning is done. And if there is, there's significantly more open area for UV to get into here to harden it up, so you're not going to get that leakage out of the little holes for days after you've done your final curing. And it makes it so much cleaner, so much nicer. You're not picking up your models and getting resin on your hands because you're not expecting to at that point. So it makes it safer, faster, and cheaper. Okay, so now you're going to say to me, well, how do we support this thing? Okay, and the answer is exactly like you'd think. It's super simple. There's nothing rocket science about the supports on this, except as I mentioned, you do not want to put any supports on the connecting edges of the models. You only want to support the base and then a certain portion of the underside of the top of the model, just to give it a little bit more support. So if you come in here, and I'll do it super fast, it's only going to take me, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 minutes to support this, maybe less. What I do, you don't necessarily have to, but I always use a medium support on my first couple. So you can see I'm trying to get this as close to the edge as I can without going over. There you go. So that way it's not going to impact the face of the edge. And I'm just going to, I'm just going to be a little bit liberal here. I'm going to throw in a couple. And I'm only going to do that in medium. I'm not going to do any more than this one row. So those are mediums. Now I'm going to switch down to light. And I'm not really going to be scientific about this because there's no reason to be. I'm going to avoid putting any on these if at all possible. You'll notice I can't avoid these ones because they are actually facing down. So I will have to do something there, but I'm going to do minimal there as well. So I'm just going to come in here and put in some supports. It's not super exciting stuff. Normally I'd be a little bit more careful, but I mean, this is just demonstrating Come up here, a little bit down there. And I'll probably only go about this high. Maybe like this, okay? And then the one thing I'll do, maybe one there, because, you know, if I can. Weird. Okay, whatever. And then I'll just go across the inside a little bit. Now, normally I'll scan up to make sure that there's no floating areas, but in the planes there won't be, but in others there wouldn't. And if there were some, I would support those accordingly on the inside of the model. But in this case, there aren't any, so I'm just going to put in pretty much at the same level that I decided to stop on the edges. A couple of these, and you'll see, there we go. So let's just make it a little bit more like that. Maybe one there, in there. There we go. And, you know, I might go one little higher here. But I do not go to the top, okay? Because there's absolutely no reason for me to do that. These supports are enough to keep this model on the plate with no problems whatsoever, because it is exceptionally light. Very, very light, okay? So that's about it for this guy, right? So now let's just demonstrate what this really means. So if I take this over here and I line them up as close to the edge of my plate as I can, and assuming that the other planes are the same, which for all intents and purposes, they're very close. I'll go, I'll put another one in there. This is just a copy of that one, but really it could have been APO2 and I could have done that one. And I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to hug this guy up. I'm going to put him right underneath. I'm not wasting any space on this plate. I want to be able to get as many of these on here as I can. And I would, if I were doing this for myself right now, I'd go in here. I would shift this over using the x-axis. I'd expect it. I'd have that as tight against these supports as I can possibly get it. And then I would scale out the rest of them. So you can, I know what I've been able to do with some of them. I've been able to put 8 of them on one plate. And this is an anycubic photon, so this is not a big plate, obviously. So that basically allows me to print all of the hills, a majority of the rivers in one shot. Like, a lot of them come out in one go. Okay. Now let's just talk about cost for a second really quickly. So if we come back here and let's say I slice this now. Now it's got, normally it might have a couple more supports. So just because of that, I'm just going to, just to get a more real idea of what the cost would be, I'm just going to add in some random supports just to give me the density that I probably would have had on here anyway if I was doing a real job. Yeah, whatever. I mean, we're close. We're close. So if we slice this, I'm guessing this is going to come out to be something like 35 cents, something like that. And just so that everybody's aware, so I pay about $44 a liter, and that's Canadian. So, you know, don't freak out if you think that that's super cheap or super expensive. You can do the conversion. But it really is going to end up being whatever it is. But I'm guessing around 36 cents. Oh, wow, cheaper than that. Okay, so 32 cents to print this one tile. So you're looking at scaling that out by 8 or 6, I think, for all the planes. 6, 3, it's about $1.80, $1.90 for all of the planes to come out. Now let's just go back for comparison purposes. So that's 32 cents for this one, right? And notice I didn't do these. I know I didn't do those, so you can add in a few more there, but it's not going to change the overall cost that much. So if we go back and we actually open up the pre-supported equivalent of that one, we'll do a quick little slice and see what the cost of it was. So there it is. Let's see what it ends up being. So 33 to 35 cents for the one that I did myself versus, slowly, I think I've done this before. I think it comes out in the 60s, but I'm not sure. Here we go. And the winner is, 66 cents. So you're looking at about half, okay? Half the cost of adopting the strategy of fully hollowing out, creating a large hole, and then supporting it yourself. But the real benefit, I mean, obviously cost is one thing. So you're using about half the resin. I don't think there's anybody who can argue that that's not a good thing. The other benefit here, though, is that in this case, I could only put 2 on the tile but on the with the other strategy, I can actually put 8. Okay, so knowing that, you're looking at probably in the most optimal scenario. Now, obviously, with some of the legendaries, you can't get that type of yield. I can probably, in most cases, put 3 legendaries on one plate using that strategy. So you're looking at least a 50% gain in speed. But in plains, rivers, all of the relatively flat ones, even the towns, stuff like that, you're looking at getting 3 to 4 times the actual rate of production. So you can do significantly more for significantly less, and with a significantly higher quality, because you're not printing edges, or you're not attaching the supports to the edges. So once again, I mean, that's 3 positives that I think have some serious ramifications for people who really want to start printing these things at volume. That's about it, I think. I might actually take this opportunity really quickly just to show you one of the ones that I have that has a bunch of them on it. I think that this one was done before I did the giant hole in the bottom, so you'll have to forgive that one. Was it plains or was it here? I think it was. Let's just do, I don't know, woodland, whatever. Can't remember which one it was at this point. And it's a lot. So I mean, there's a lot on this plate. There's a lot going on, so it's going to take a little while. Okay, so this one actually has 8. Okay, and as you can see, I didn't hollow out this one, and this one was before I didn't want to print along the edges. So I've learned since then, okay? But you can see that given this strategy, and I actually use this option here to shift things around to get them as close as you can imagine to each other. They are sitting within inches of each other. Not inches, sorry, millimeters, to get those onto the plate. So that's about it. That's all I wanted to show you guys. The keys to this is make sure you hollow and make sure you use a larger hole in the back to avoid resin leakage and to reduce cost. Don't print on your edges because your tiles won't have effective, they won't have the ability to connect properly. You'll end up with rockage and you just won't be happy with the overall result. And the leakage problem is a huge one. I already mentioned it, but I've ended up having things leak right onto the top as it was curing as well, so it ends up ruining the actual model itself. Okay, so that's about it. You know, I mean, this is one of my first attempts at trying to give anybody guidance on 3D printing at all. I hope that you got something out of this, and if not, you know, feel free to, you know, just go your own way, because I mean, this is all about the journey. It's not about, nobody's doing it the right way and nobody's doing it the wrong way. We just got to figure out what the best way is for, you know, all of us collectively to figure out how to print these things, because they're an amazing, amazing set. I'm actually putting some on my wall in my basement as kind of like a centerpiece with some more 3D printed stuff, and it's coming out fantastic right now. I gotta admit, I'm kind of suck at painting, but I'm gonna get somebody else to do that. But they are coming out amazing, and I'm very happy. And that's it. So you guys have a great day, and I'll probably put something else up with some other pointer later on. Okay, bye.